The sonar pinged once. Then again. A shape rose from the dark water, a rectangle, then a street, then what looked like stairs. The ship's crew stared at the screen. No coral does that. No reef draws perfect lines like a city map. The lead researcher, Layla, put her palm on the glass. "That's not natural," she whispered. The coordinates pointed north of Cuba. Deep water. No records. No legends. Nothing. They lowered a camera. A shadow turned with the current. Blocks of stone appeared, carved and stacked. The camera light flickered. Something reflected back. A symbol. It glowed for a second, then died. A low hum came through the speakers like breath in a tomb. The captain looked at Layla. "We keep going." Layla nodded. "We started this. We finish it." The ocean answered with silence. And then, one more ping. The sea looked calm, but the line on the sonar was not calm. It was too clean. It was too straight. The small research vessel drifted over deep blue water north of Cuba. The sky was clear. The sun was kind. But the crew was quiet. They were not here for dolphins or coral. They had come because of a rumor that started with a fishing boat and ended with a question. What draws straight lines under a wild ocean? Layla stood with both hands on the console. She was the lead scientist on this trip. Her hair was tied back. Her eyes did not blink much. She loved hard facts. She hated tricks. The ocean had many tricks. She knew that. But the sonar kept telling the same story. The shapes below looked like streets. They looked like stairs. They looked like walls. How could that be? This part of the sea was not shallow. It was not a bay. It was a drop into blue darkness. The charts showed no wrecks, no pipes, no cables. The captain checked them twice. "Omar, the sonar wrapped the cube in a cloth and set it in a padded case. She looked at the ocean, flat and shining and empty. It did not look like a city was down there. It did not look like anything was down there. But below, the square waited. The steps waited. The round stone that glowed waited. Layla felt like the sea was watching them the way a city watches people at night, from windows, from doors. She turned to the captain. "We go back," she said. "At dawn. We go deeper." The captain nodded. The crew drifted to their posts, quiet and careful. In the lab, the cube sat under a lamp. Its surface showed faint lines that only appeared when the light hit from a low angle. The lines crossed and made small knots. Omar lifted the lamp and moved it, and the knots seemed to shift like stars when clouds move. "It's just a trick," he said, but he did not sound sure. Layla wrote notes in a small book. She wrote simple facts: depth, coordinates, time. She did not write about the glow. She did not write about the hum. Not yet. Facts first. The ocean could make people see things that were not there. She knew that. Night came. The sea stayed calm. The ship's generator hummed. The crew took turns sleeping. Layla lay awake. She tried to imagine a city underwater. She tried to picture people walking on those stones. Who built it? When? Why so far from shore? Or maybe the shore was different once. Maybe the world was different once. The thought made her chest feel tight. She got up and went to the lab. The cube was there, quiet, dark, simple. She put her hand near it and felt nothing this time. She wanted to feel the buzz again. She wanted a sign. A small click came from the speaker on the wall. Just one click, like a drop of water falling in a metal cup. Layla looked up. The speaker was off. She took a step to it. Another click. Then the light over the door flickered once. It held steady after. Layla looked at the cube. It looked back at her, or it felt like it did. She opened the case and lifted the cloth. There was a small mark on one face she had not seen before. It looked like a swirl carved with a sharp tool. It was so shallow it was almost nothing. She put the cloth back. In the morning, the wind shifted. The sea changed color with the sun. The crew moved with quiet speed. Lines were coiled. The ROV was checked. The camera was cleaned. The captain called the depth. Omar marked a new path on the map. They would cross the square and move south along the long straight line like a road. Layla stood at the rail for a moment and looked down. The water held their reflections. Her face looked calm. Her hands did not feel calm. She wanted the glow again, but she also feared it. That was honest. She held both feelings. They lowered the ROV. The lights lit the water. The screen showed the pale sand again, the edge of a block, the seam that ran straight like a thread pulled tight. The ROV moved south and came to the side of a wall of fitted stones. The wall ran left and right until the light did not reach. It was tall, taller than a person, taller than two. There were notches in it at even spaces like places to seat beams. Omar swallowed. "It's a city," he said, so soft that only he could hear himself. The captain glanced at Layla. She did not look away from the screen. The ROV turned the corner of the wall. There, half buried, was a statue. It had no face left. The sea had sanded that away. But its shoulders were broad, and its hands were folded in front of it, and it wore a narrow band across the chest that met at a small square shape. Like a cube. The camera moved closer. A fish flashed past and was gone. The statue leaned slightly, as if it had been pushed by a slow, heavy hand for centuries. The light shifted, and for a second, the band across the chest seemed to shine. Layla leaned in, almost pressing her forehead to the glass. The statue's folded hands sat on a flat stone. On that stone, under a thin film of sand, was a shallow groove that formed a curve. The curve joined another. It was a symbol. Maybe the same swirl as on the cube. "Brush it," Layla said. Omar pulsed the thrusters. The wash cleared the sand. The symbol was there. It was simple. It was beautiful. And it pointed somewhere. The curve ended in a small notch like an arrow. The arrow aimed down a dark gap between two walls. The gap was narrow. The ROV eased toward it. The lights did not reach the end. The video grain grew like fog. A current moved through the gap, steady and slow, like breath. The ROV paused. Layla felt the ship tilt slightly under her feet as a small wave passed. The lab clock ticked. The speaker clicked once, then went quiet. "We go in," Layla whispered. The ROV's lights brightened. The gap waited like a mouth. The camera slid forward. The dark wrapped around the frame. And then, from inside the gap, something small reflected back and moved. The gap swallowed the light like a long throat. The ROV inched forward, its thrusters whispering. Sand lifted, swirled, settled again. The walls on either side were smooth stone with thin seams. The seams ran straight, then shifted in small steps, like the builders had followed a plan that changed as it grew. "Keep your distance," the captain said. His voice was careful. "If the ceiling's loose." He did not finish. The ceiling arched low. Strands of white sponge hung from cracks like old threads. A small crab flicked across the floor and vanished into a hole. The corridor opened into a chamber. The ROV floated in the center and turned. The lights fell on shapes that did not belong to nature. Frames. Bases. Sockets worn smooth by time. On the far side, a wide doorway stood between two tall stones. The top lintel had fallen, and now leaned against the frame, as if the door had tried to close and froze halfway. The floor of the chamber held a ring of stones around a shallow bowl carved into the ground. The bowl was black. Not painted black, not soot. It looked like stone melted and cool. That made no sense at this depth. Nothing burned here. Not now. Layla felt the same pressure on her ears she had felt the day before when the round stone glowed. The ship was quiet. The crew leaned in without speaking. Omar rolled the ROV closer to the ring. The bowl's surface reflected the lights in a dull way, like it drank the brightness and gave back almost nothing. At the rim, a set of tiny marks ran in a circle. The marks were regular, like ticks on a clock. There were many, too many to count quickly. "Measure the ring," Layla said. Omar called out the diameter. He counted the ticks with his finger on the screen. 60, he said. "No, 61. Wait, there's a gap. Maybe it's 60. The ROV camera tilted up. On the chamber wall, thin lines formed a simple map. A square, a circle, a long line, and then a set of stacked steps. It was like the sonar image drawn by a patient hand. At the bottom of the map, a spiral turned inward. A tiny notch at the center pointed to a small mark that did not look like the others. The mark looked like a seed, or an eye, or a door. Layla's mouth felt dry. She remembered the swirl she saw on the cube. She looked over her shoulder at the lab bench where the cube sat in its case. It looked still, but in her mind, she heard the click again. "Let's not push into other rooms yet," the captain said. "We map this and exit." Layla nodded, but her eyes did not leave the doorway with the fallen lintel. The water moved there. Not fast, just a slow pulse, the kind that happens in caves when the pressure breathes with the tide. Omar circled the chamber. A small statue at knee height of something big move across the far edge of the plaza. The shadow had a shape, not a fish, not a ray, not a shark. It was tall and thin, and then it bent and was gone. The crew held still. The ROV hung in the water like a breath held in a chest. Omar whispered, "Did you see that?" Layla did not answer. The captain reached for the throttle. He did not touch it. He waited. The shadow did not return. The water went back to being water. The screen showed only stone and sand and quiet. On the way up, the ROV's lights flickered once, twice, and then settled. The ship rolled a little. The wind shifted again. A squall line stood far on the horizon like a bruise. The crew said little as they rinsed the gear. Layla went inside and drew more symbols. The spiral, the seed, the ticks, the cube's lattice. She felt like she had been given pieces of a map by a hand she could not see. At the bottom of the page, she wrote one word, when. She almost wrote who and why. But she stopped. One question at a time. That night, the radio hissed again. Not loud. A hush. Not static like wind. It sounded like a whisper through carved stone. Omar turned the knob and the sound faded to almost nothing, and then came back like it had never been gone. He set the volume to low and left it. Layla sat with the cube. She set it on the table with the swirl mark facing up. She took a dropper and let a single drop of water touch the swirl. The drop spread and left a dark wet spot. For a second, the lines around the swirl looked deeper. Then it all went flat again. Layla sighed, then laughed at herself. Her laugh stopped when the deck light flickered. The radio hush turned to a thin tone again. The tone rose and then fell. It was like the sea was tuning a string. The tone settled on a note that matched the ring in her ears from earlier. The speaker clicked once. Twice. The ship creaked. It always creaked. But the timing of the creaks felt like steps across a wooden floor. Layla stood up fast and knocked her knee on the table. The cube did not move. It sat like a quiet heart. She did not like the silence now. Silence after a tone felt like someone waiting for an answer. She looked at the chart of the site. The corridor. The chamber. The melted bowl. The doorway. She traced the spiral with her finger, inward to the center where the seed mark waited. It was just a scratch on a wall under cold water. But her hand felt warm. She knew what she would say in the morning. She would say it to the captain, and he would not like it, and he might say no. But she would say it anyway. "We go to the center," she would say. "We go to the seed." Morning broke with a pale line on the horizon. The wind was soft again. The sea wore a thin skin of silver. The crew moved like people who had a plan they did not want to say out loud. The captain looked older. He had not slept much. He watched the sky like a man reads another man's face. Layla met him on the bridge. She held her notebook. She pointed to the spiral drawing. "We go to the center," she said. He did not answer right away. He rubbed his thumb along the railing. Then he nodded once. "We go," he said. "But careful." They lowered the ROV and followed the long lines to the big square plaza. They crossed it and passed the leaning wedge, the broken pillar with the sun and the dark center. The camera turned east along a path the team had not taken before. The sand here was thinner, as if the water kept sweeping it clean. The stones under the sand showed patterns. Some were plain. Some had simple shapes sunk into them, curves, crosses, spirals. The spirals grew tighter as they went, small at first, then larger, then small again. It felt like a heartbeat, or like counting, or like walking stairs inside a shell. The path narrowed between two low walls. The walls had gaps where stones had gone missing. In those gaps, fans of coral had grown like pale hands. Fish peered out and then darted back. The ROV's lights made the coral glow with soft fire, then fade. The path opened into a circle. At the center was a low platform of 4 fitted stones. On top lay another round disc like the one in the plaza. but this one had a deep groove cut into it that spiraled inward to a hole no bigger than a thumbprint. Around the disc, small markers stood in a ring, each carved with a different simple sign. Layla felt her mouth go dry again. She had a small bottle of water near her hand. She took a sip and felt the cool in her throat. She pointed at the hole at the center of the disc. "That is the seed," she said. Omar nodded. He adjusted the camera to catch the groove. The groove had tiny channels cut into it like veins. The channels led to the hole. The ROV hovered. The thrusters ticked. The water in the groove moved, almost nothing, a hint of flow like breath. The cube sat on the lab bench in its case with the cloth folded back. The swirl on one face looked like a small storm frozen in stone. Layla lifted the case and set it beside the console. She did not touch the cube. She looked at the ROV feed. The disc at the center waited like a hand held out. She looked at the cube again. It was wrong to think a small thing like that could matter down there. It was only a carved stone. Weight and edges. But the marks on it were not random. The missing lattice lines matched the missing ticks on the bowl. The swirl matched the symbol that pointed to the gap. The seed hole could be a socket. Or not. The thought made her heart beat hard enough to hear. "Don't," the captain said softly, before she asked. "We don't put unknown things into unknown holes at the bottom of the ocean." Layla almost smiled, then did not. "We won't," she said. "Not yet." She pointed to the markers around the disc. "Let's read first." Omar brought the camera to each marker. Each was a simple shape, a line, a broken line, a cross, a dot inside a circle, 3 dots, a triangle, a curve with a notch. On one marker, the shape was a small square with a swirl inside. The swirl turned the other way from the cube's face. Layla wrote fast. As the ROV circled the marker with the reversed swirl, the ship rolled a little on a slow swell. The camera jolted and the light slid across the disc. Something flashed in the hole. Not light. It looked like a film of air trapped there. But at this depth, there was no air. Maybe it was a bubble from the ROV. Omar checked the thrust. No bubbles. He tapped the casing again without meaning to. The flash went away. The groove looked like a dry riverbed. The hole looked like a small, patient eye. They pulled back and scanned the circle. Outside the ring of markers, stones rose in low arcs like seats. If this was a place, it was a place to gather and listen. To what? To a person? To a machine? To water itself? On the arc to the north, a taller stone stood with a flat face. It held an etching that was more detailed than the others. It showed a coastline with 5 bays. A set of dots ran offshore in a straight line and stopped over a shape like a square. If the carving was a map, then the dots were a path from land to sea, from shore to the circle. Layla's pen paused. The coastline looked a little like the Cuban shore on old maps when the shelf was wider. Or maybe that was just what she wanted to see. The ROV drifted higher. The camera caught the circle as a whole. The ring of markers. The disc with the spiral groove. The arcs like seats. The tall map stone. Shadows lay in clean shapes like the place had geometry still inside it even after long collapse. Layla glanced at the time. They had been down longer than they meant to. "Let's take a last look and go," she said. Omar turned the ROV toward the path out. Then, before they reached the choke point between the low walls, the radio hissed again. The hiss grew into a tone. The same tone as before. The lights on the ROV dimmed and brightened like a breath. On the center disk, a faint line of pale light moved along the spiral groove. It flowed slowly inward, like water under moonlight. It reached the hole and vanished. The tone dropped a little. Another pale line began at the outer edge and crept inward. Omar froze his hands, afraid of jerking the controls. The captain leaned over his shoulder, his jaw clenched. Layla's fingers hovered above the case of the cube and then fell to her sides. She forced herself to watch. The second line reached the hole and died. The tone faded. The lights steadied. The spiral groove went back to stone. The ship creaked. Water slapped the hull in small sounds. The crew let out breath. Tides, the captain said, almost like a prayer. Some piezoelectric effect? Omar tried to laugh and failed. That's your word of the day. Layla did not try to name it. She looked at the case. Her mind kept trying to put the cube into the hole like a key into a lock. She did not like that, she wanted that. They backed the ROV out through the narrow path. As it turned one last time to look back, the camera saw movement. A fine line of sand lifted from the groove in the center disk and rose like smoke. It drifted toward the marker with a reversed swirl and settled on its top as if guided. Then the water went still. The marker looked the same as before. The light played tricks. The crew said nothing. On deck, the wind pressed the flags a little harder. The squall line far away had crept closer but still did not move fast. The air felt heavy, like it held more than itself. Layla closed the case on the cube and latched it. The click sounded too loud in the quiet lab. She opened her notebook and drew the disk with the spiral groove. She marked the hole. She drew the reversed swirl on the marker. She circled it. She did not write key. She did not write lock. She wrote answer with a question mark. It did not help. Omar brought up an old bathymetry layer he had loaded as a curiosity from a pre-trip data pack. He overlaid their path. The big square plaza. The road lines. The circle. When he added the recorded tones from the radio and the ROV power dips, the marks made a rough rhythm. Not perfect. Not neat. But it was there. Layla counted without knowing she was counting. The ticks matched the deep ticks on the bevel of the wedge. The missing tick matched the cube. A pattern tried to be born right in front of them. It was like trying to listen to a song through a wall. At sunset, the sea turned red and then bruised purple. The crew ate without speaking much. The captain told a story about a storm from 10 years ago. It was calm for days, he said. Calm like this. Then it came at night with a low growl. The growl felt like it came from the water itself, not the sky. He laughed and shook his head. Just stories, he said. No one laughed with him. Layla went to the lab again. She placed the case with the cube in the center of the table. She opened it. She set the cube on a soft ring of cloth. She took a small dropper and filled it with distilled water. She did not know why she did that. She stood there for a long time. She did not drop the water into the swirl. She did not fit the cube into any hole. She just stood and listened. The ship creaked. The wind hummed through a line somewhere. The generator throbbed. Far below, stone waited. The map waited. The reversed swirl waited. Layla finally spoke to no one. If it is a door, she said, what happens when it opens? The radio answered with a soft click, then silence. The deck light flickered once, like a wink. Then it held steady again, like a held breath. She closed the case. She turned off the lab light. As she did, the cube made a tiny sound. Not a ring. Not a hum. A dry, small sound like two stones tapping once. Layla stopped with her hand on the switch. She turned the light back on. The cube was where she left it. The case was open. The room was the same. But on the cloth, beside the cube, there was a fine line of pale sand she had not seen before. It made a curve. It ended in a tiny notch. The next morning, the team gathered on the deck. The sea was calm. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting gold lines across the waves. Dr. Elena held the printouts of the sonar scans in her hands. The lines were jagged, but they were not random. They formed angles and curves that looked like walls and streets. Miguel pointed at the shapes. See this? It's too regular. Nature doesn't make such straight lines. His voice was calm, but his eyes were wide. The image showed something like a square plaza. Around it, There were long straight lines that looked like roads. Some parts even looked like stairs. Captain Reyes stood beside them. "So what are you saying? A lost city? Down there?" His tone was half joking, but nobody laughed. Elena took a deep breath. If these readings are correct, this structure is at least 2,000 feet below sea level. No city should be there. At least not one from human history as we know it. The wind picked up, carrying the salty smell of the sea. The crew was quiet, listening to the hum of the ship. They all stared at the sonar image. It was just a blurry outline, yet it made them feel small, as if something ancient was watching them from the dark. Miguel turned to Elena. "We need more proof. We should send the ROV again, this time with better lighting. Maybe we can catch a glimpse." Elena nodded. "Yes. But we also need to be careful. There are strange currents down there. Last night, the ROV nearly lost signal." The team worked all morning. They upgraded the cameras, replaced the batteries, and checked the cables. By noon, the ROV was ready. The sea had turned a deeper blue under the midday sun. As the ROV sank, the screen lit up with shades of green and black. Fish flickered past the lens. Strange shadows drifted in the deep. The descent was slow, every 100 feet marked by a soft beep from the control console. Finally, the sonar blip came into view. The ROV's lights swept across the ocean floor. Something emerged from the dark, a row of massive stone blocks. They were covered in sand and coral, but the shape was unmistakable. Straight lines. Sharp edges. Elena leaned forward. "Zoom in." The camera closed in on a section of the stone. There were carvings, faded, almost erased by time. Spirals, lines, and symbols they could not read. They looked old. Very old. Miguel whispered, This is not natural." Then something strange happened. The ROV's camera picked up a flash. It was brief, like a faint glow coming from inside one of the stone structures. The crew stared at the screen. "Did you see that?" Elena said. Captain Reyes frowned. "Could be a reflection. Or a fish." "No," Miguel said quietly. "That light, it came from inside." They tried to steer the ROV closer, but the current grew stronger. The machine tilted, the cables strained. Alarms began to beep. "Pull it back," the captain ordered. The ROV struggled, its lights swinging wildly. The camera caught one last glimpse of the ruins, a huge archway half buried in sand. It looked like an entrance to something much bigger. Then the signal flickered. Static filled the screen. The feed went dark. The deck was silent. Only the waves slapped against the hull. Elena straightened up. "We got what we needed. There's something down there. Something that was built." Miguel looked pale. "And something that might still be working." Captain Reyes scratched his beard. "So what's the next move? We can't just tell the world, we found a city, without real proof." Elena held the sonar printouts close. "We go deeper. But next time, we go ourselves." Miguel stared at her. "You want to dive down there?" "Yes," she said. "We can't stop now. Whatever is down there, it's waiting." The sea stretched out around them, endless and blue. Somewhere beneath those calm waters lay the shapes they had seen. Walls, arches, symbols, and that brief mysterious glow. None of them said it out loud, but they all felt the same thing. This was only the beginning. The night would come soon. And with it, the question they all tried to ignore: who built that city? And why did it vanish? The next day came heavy with clouds. The sea was restless, its surface broken by low rolling waves. The air smelled like rain. Dr. Elena stood near the bow, watching the horizon fade into a gray blur. She held a letter in her hand, a sealed envelope that had arrived that morning by helicopter. It carried a single warning from an unknown office in Havana: "Cease operations immediately. You are entering restricted waters." Miguel read the note over her shoulder. Who sent this? No name, Elena said. Her voice was tight. Only a red stamp, something about national interest. Captain Reyes cursed under his breath. I knew it. This is bigger than just an old ruin. The team gathered. Their equipment was ready for a deep dive. 2 special suits, pressure-resistant, lay on the deck. Each had lights, cameras, and thruster packs. They were designed for extreme depths, but not for what might be waiting down there. Do we stop? Miguel asked. Elena looked at the sea. No. We go down. We saw light in those ruins. Something is active. The captain hesitated. If this goes wrong, there's no rescue. The current down there could crush you. I know, she said. But we came for answers. By afternoon, the rain began to fall, thin, cold lines cutting across the deck. The divers suited up. Miguel checked the oxygen tanks twice. Elena adjusted her helmet, her face pale but determined. The winch lowered them slowly into the gray sea. The water closed over their heads, cutting off the sound of the world above. Only their breathing filled their ears. Lights flickered on, piercing the dark. The ocean floor was far below, but as they descended, strange shapes emerged, jagged rocks, then the edge of the ruin. It was larger than they imagined. Walls stretched out like the skeleton of a forgotten city. Some parts were tilted, others buried. Faint currents moved the sand in slow, ghostly waves. Look at that, Miguel whispered through the comms. Those stones. They look carved. Elena moved closer to a wall. Her gloved hand brushed against the surface. It was smooth. Symbols ran across it, glowing faintly when her light passed over them, as if the stone remembered something. Did you see that? She said. It reacted to the light. Miguel turned, scanning with his camera. That's impossible. It's just reflection. But then they saw it again. A doorway, half open, with a dim blue glow leaking out. The same glow the ROV caught last night. Elena's heartbeat quickened. This is it. They swam closer. The entrance was tall, built for giants, it seemed. Sand drifted in lazy clouds around the base. Strange coral grew like fingers across the archway. The blue light pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. Suddenly, the current shifted. A deep vibration ran through the water, so low they felt it in their bones. Did you feel that? Miguel said. Yes, Elena whispered. Something's moving. A shadow passed across their lights. Not a fish, too large, too smooth. It vanished before they could follow it. Elena swallowed hard. Keep recording. We go in. Inside, the light grew stronger. The passage was lined with huge stone slabs, each carved with patterns that looked like stars and waves. As they went deeper, the water felt warmer. It was as if the city still had power somewhere in its heart. Who built this? Miguel murmured. No one we know, Elena said. This is older than any map. Older than any story. Then they reached a chamber. It was vast, a dome that stretched wider than their lights could reach. Pillars rose from the floor, covered in glowing vines. In the center, a structure floated. Yes, floated, a block of dark stone suspended in the water, humming faintly. That's not possible, Miguel said. It's defying gravity. Elena stared at it. Or using something we don't understand. She moved closer. Her suit sensors beeped, faint energy, like a low magnetic field. Suddenly, the glow pulsed bright, blinding for a second. A rush of bubbles filled the chamber. The sound of their comms cracked with static. Elena! Back away! Miguel shouted. But she was already reaching out. The moment her glove touched the stone, a wave of light rippled through the room. The carvings lit up, the pillars shimmered, and a low tone echoed in the water. It wasn't random. It was a sound, a call. The water grew still. Then, from the dark beyond the dome, something stirred. A long, slow shadow moved in the distance. Miguel grabbed her arm. We have to go. Now. Elena looked at the stone, then at the shadow. We just woke it up. The chamber trembled. Not with force, but with something deeper. A vibration that ran through the bones of the divers and made their teeth ache. The blue glow grew brighter, then dimmed, then pulsed again, like a slow, ancient heartbeat. Miguel pulled Elena back, his hands tight on her arm, but she didn't resist. Her eyes were fixed on the floating block of dark stone. It was no longer silent. It was humming. Above them, a thin stream of bubbles rose as if the water itself was stirring. The pillars that lined the chamber began to shift. Not collapsing, not breaking. They moved, like doors that had been waiting for centuries. Cracks of light appeared between them, stretching upward, tracing invisible lines across the dome. Elena, we're not alone, Miguel whispered. The shadow they saw before was closer now. It drifted slowly, a shape without edges, too large to understand. The light caught part of it, smooth, metallic, and scarred. It wasn't a creature. It looked like a machine. Elena's heart raced. This city, it's not abandoned. The shadow turned. A low sound rumbled through the water, making their lights flicker. The block in the center pulsed again, and then, with a slow motion, it began to sink toward the floor. Miguel gripped his camera. We need to leave. We need to bring this footage back. But the current shifted again, pulling them deeper into the chamber. Sand rose in swirls, clouding the water. The machine moved closer, its shape clearer now. It had arms, or something like arms, long and jointed, covered in patterns that glowed faintly. Its head, if it was a head, had no eyes, only a narrow slit of blue light. Elena, it's watching us, Miguel said. She shook her head. No. It's scanning us. A beam of pale light swept over them, one by one. Their suits beeped in warning, a spike in unknown radiation, harmless for now, but strange. Then, without warning, the machine moved past them. Not attacking. Not fleeing. Just moving, as if it had a purpose older than they could guess. It stopped near the block and extended one of its arms. The symbols on the block flared to life. Elena, what is it doing? Miguel whispered. She stared. It's waking the city. The floor rumbled again. Beyond the dome, more lights flickered to life, lines of blue running across the ruins outside, like veins under ancient skin. The ocean around them changed. The water felt warmer, and the current was no longer random. It had direction, as if the city itself was breathing. Miguel's voice trembled. If this thing comes fully online, what happens to the surface? We don't know, Elena said, her voice low. But I think that warning from Havana wasn't about safety. It was about keeping this buried. Her comms crackled. The captain's voice cut through. Elena. Miguel. Surface conditions are changing. Sensors are spiking. Get out now. They turned toward the exit, but the passage was darker now, the doorway half closed with strange, growing coral-like structures. Miguel cursed. It's sealing us in. Elena swam faster, the light from her helmet cutting through the murk. There. A gap. They squeezed through, the coral scraping their suits. The chamber behind them pulsed one last time before the doorway sealed shut with a dull thud. As they rose, they looked back. The city was no longer silent. Light spread across the ruins in a slow, deliberate wave, connecting broken towers, half-buried streets, and dark tunnels. Something ancient had turned its gaze upward again. Elena, we didn't discover a ruin, Miguel said. We woke it. They broke the surface into a storm. The sea was wild now, whipped by sudden winds. The research vessel rocked hard as waves slammed its hull. Captain Reyes and the crew dragged them aboard, pulling off their helmets. What happened down there? The captain shouted over the wind. Elena caught her breath. It's alive. The captain stared at her. The city. No, she whispered. Something inside it. Thunder rolled in the distance. The storm was not natural. The radar showed a circular disturbance forming directly over the ruins. Lightning flickered across the clouds. "We have to leave this area," the captain said. "Right now." Miguel clutched the footage recorder. "We need to send this to the world." But even as he spoke, the radio crackled, a new signal, strong and cold. "This is the Cuban Naval Command. Cease transmission. Shut down all equipment. Await escort." Everyone froze. Captain Reyes switched channels. The same message came again, repeated in 3 languages. There was no chance to argue. Elena looked at Miguel. "They know it's waking. And they want it kept quiet." He nodded slowly. "Then we're in their waters. And in their secrets." As the ship turned away, the storm grew darker behind them. Something vast moved under the waves. Not a machine, not a creature, but the shadow of the city itself shifting, stretching, ready to rise. The question burned in their minds as the rain lashed their faces. What did they just unleash, and how long before it reaches the surface? The storm chased them for miles. The sea roared like something alive, as if the ocean itself wanted to drag them back. Waves smashed against the research vessel's hull, lightning cracked across the sky, and the radar screen glowed with a swirling pattern that followed their course. Captain Reyes stood at the bridge, his jaw tight. "They don't want us to leave. Or something doesn't." Elena clutched the railing, her wetsuit still dripping. The recorder in Miguel's hands blinked with a red light, full of everything they had seen. The blue lights, the machine, the pulsing heart of the city. But their radio still hissed with the same command: "Cease transmission. Await escort." "Captain," Miguel said, "what if the escort never comes? What if they want to make sure this never leaves Cuban waters?" Reyes didn't answer. His eyes stayed on the storm behind them, a storm that was no longer chasing. It was growing. Lightning spidered across the horizon in a perfect circle over the ruins. And at the center of that circle, the water bulged upward, like something immense was breathing beneath it. "Satellite link is gone," one of the crew muttered. "GPS keeps resetting." Elena's stomach tightened. "It's the city. It's interfering with everything." Night fell, though the clock said it was still late afternoon. The storm turned the sky black, and the rain fell in heavy sheets. They anchored at a small inlet on a nearby island to wait out the chaos. The air smelled of salt and something metallic, almost like burning iron. Inside the cramped cabin, Elena, Miguel, and Captain Reyes huddled over a low table. The captain set down a weathered folder, its cover marked with the Cuban naval seal. "This isn't the first time someone saw that city," he said. Elena frowned. "You've known about it?" The captain's face was grim. "Fishermen reported strange lights here for decades. Divers disappeared. In the 1960s, a Soviet submarine went missing near this site. They sent divers down, too. Only one came back, half mad, talking about towers under the sea." He opened the folder. Inside were grainy black and white photographs, blurred shapes underwater, strange carvings, and one picture that made Elena's breath catch. It was the same dark block they had seen, glowing. Miguel leaned in. "You kept this classified. Why?" Reyes closed the folder. "Because whatever that city is, it doesn't want to be found. Every time someone gets too close, something happens: storms, equipment failure, even illness." Elena whispered, "Then why let us dive?" The captain looked away. "Orders. Higher than me. They wanted to see if it was still dormant." Outside, the wind howled. A deep, low rumble rolled across the sea. The lights flickered. The radio hissed again, but this time, it wasn't Cuban command. A new voice emerged. Slow. Hollow. Not human. "You woke us." The crew froze. "Leave this place." The voice was faint, like it came from far below the ocean floor. Elena's skin prickled. "Who is this? What are you?" No answer. Only the sound of rushing water, like a tide pulling back. Miguel grabbed the recorder. "It's transmitting on every channel." Reyes slammed the radio off. "We're leaving. First light, we're out." But sleep didn't come for anyone. The storm raged through the night. At one point, the crew heard something scraping along the hull, long, slow, like metal fingers. Elena lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the images in her mind, the machine's arms, the blue veins of light, the way the city pulsed like a heart. By dawn, the sea was calmer, but only on the surface. The radar still showed a vast circular disturbance beneath them, spreading outward. It was no longer just near Cuba. The edges reached toward shipping lanes. Miguel stepped onto the deck, his camera in hand. "If this keeps expanding, it will block half the Caribbean." Elena nodded. "It's spreading its reach." That wasn't a warning last night. It was a demand. They sailed for open waters, but a dark shape appeared on the horizon. Not a storm this time, but ships. Military ships. Cuban flags, black hulls, moving in formation. Reyes swore under his breath. "Escort." The largest ship signaled them to stop. A voice crackled over the radio. "You will hand over all recordings. All notes. This site is restricted by international treaty." "International treaty?" Miguel said. "What treaty?" Elena whispered. "The kind that never makes the news." They had a choice. Obey, or run. Miguel glanced at the recorder, then at the growing dark patch on the sea map. "If that city keeps waking up, the world will feel it. People need to know." Reyes tightened his grip on the wheel. "And if they silence us before that happens?" From the deck, Elena looked back one last time. The storm clouds still circled the ruins like a giant, spinning eye. Lightning flashed, and for a moment, she thought she saw something rise far below the surface. Not a tower this time. A shape. Massive. Triangular. "Captain," she said quietly. "What if that's just the first part coming up?" The wind carried a faint hum across the water. Low. Steady. Growing stronger. They had woken something ancient. Now it was deciding what to do with them.